Nigerian directors of Seplat, one of the most successful of these new Nigerian operators. And in fact, why I was so intrigued to take up the invitation of the governor to come to the Delta was I chair its Committee for Sustainable Responsibility, the CSR, Social Responsibility, the CSR Committee. And so actually you're going to be back in a few weeks' time doing a field trip to see how Seplat's doing with the communities around where it operates. So these issues of how you build trust, how you build inclusive development, are for me ones that I've lived with all my working life, and have, for a large part of that, seen it through the changing lens of the roles I've had vis-a-vis Nigeria. And so, you know, what I want to quickly do, because we've had a lot of speeches today, and I think the sooner we can get to the exchanges of some Q&A sessions with other participants as well, the better. You know, what I want to quickly do is, you know, talk about the issues that, for me as an outside friend of Nigeria, seem to be absolutely critical. And the first is the experience of the markets earlier this year, when actually they stayed buoyant despite the political crisis in Abuja between the central bank and presidency. And you know, I saw it firsthand because Seplat was raising money on the Nigerian and London markets at that time. And what's very, very clear is there is a lot of international money which wants to find a safe way to invest in Nigeria. If it can find well-regulated, transparent companies with a high level of corporate governance, the capital is there. People are looking for what investors love to call a Nigerian play, and they are particularly looking for a Delta play, because they understand that with a diversified portfolio, Nigeria, with its market of 170 million people, is a market they cannot afford not to be in. And the trick is to make them understand that the vehicles, as I said in the case of onshore, are increasingly going to be a whole new generation of Nigerian indigenous companies, because they can bridge this issue of trust and development, which has so troubled the best and genuinely really best efforts of the international operators, who are run by very able, dedicated people, but cannot get out from under this history which benighted their earlier involvement in the country. So you're seeing it already in the performance of these indigenous operators: much less oil theft, much less interruption to their operations, much higher levels of delivery. There are some bigger problems, as the Minister would no doubt agree, in which she's tackling, I know, in the industry as a whole, with production now below the 2 million barrels a day that we always thought of as the baseline for the Nigerian oil industry, and with a collapse of the old favorite market for Nigerian oil, the United States, as it has become shifted to oil from shale. And this is requiring Nigeria to find new markets, and in some of those markets it's less geographically well placed than new producers on the east coast of the country. So there's plenty of challenges in the oil and gas sector which go beyond that to the need to kind of have more product in country, more value added in country, with Mr. Dangote's plans for a refinery being a first way of tackling that. But a lot of other challenges as well to get the right kind of investment. But perhaps bigger than that is the issue of the gas and the gas flaring, which still goes on in this region. And how do we make sure that practice ends, and indeed the gas becomes the basis for an electricity and energy and power strategy for this country as a whole? Every president of Nigeria I have talked to since President Obasanjo has been consumed with how do you build out the electricity grid of this country. Because at the moment it's a huge tax on the economic efficiency of manufacturing and of agriculture in this country. Even little Ghana next door has 2 times the electricity consumption per capita of Nigeria. The numbers are dismal. Qatar, that minute country which, you know, with big football ambitions, but still less than 1 million people, you know, uses more energy than the whole of Nigeria. So building out that energy infrastructure is an absolutely critical baseline platform for diversifying this economy. Let me say a word about agriculture. You're going to hear a lot more about it. This problem that you are grappling with here in Bayelsa is not unique to you. If you look at Angola, arguably Angola's got some of the best farming land in Africa, but it too has struggled with how do you diversify when you have this high cost, high inflation sector oil. How on earth do you build a competitive, low-cost agriculture sector adjacent to it? There's a name for it. It's called the Dutch disease. It was what happened in the, you know, in European economies as well, when the discovery of oil and gas made them uncompetitive in other sectors because of its impact on labor costs and prices more broadly. And yet the results, which is that, you know, today Nigeria produces less rice than it did 50 years ago, is astonishing, and it's made this region of Nigeria and West Africa, Nigeria itself the 3rd biggest rice importer in the world, and the region essentially the biggest. It is absurd, as many of your leaders know, that in a country like this, with the agricultural land and opportunity it has, here in the Delta, but also in the north, which used to be the agricultural heartland of the country 50 years ago, it is extraordinary that Nigeria has slipped so far from the base ambition of feeding itself when it comes to crops of this kind. And, you know, I know through my business activities that it doesn't stop with rice. You know, I am involved in a firm which has some very successful investments in fast foods and restaurants in Lagos and elsewhere across the country. It cannot secure the supply of chickens to the quality it needs within the Nigerian farming sector. These are basic challenges of management, organization, and cost, which you have to get onto. But let me just, because as I say, I think it's much better that we get to a conversation, let me just sort of, in a sense, round up by saying, you know, your number one problem, and I think it's being addressed by the national conference going on in Abuja, whether it's successful or not, because this is not the first time Nigerian leaders have tried to solve this, is to build a polity, to build a sense of political inclusion that has all Nigerians rowing in the same direction behind the same objectives. And that means reducing the sharp inequalities in the economy, which in a sense fan political discontent at the moment. The second objective is to build out that infrastructure, the power, the roads. You know, my last time in Lagos was during the Nigeria-France World Cup game, and I was absolutely on Nigeria's side, let me leave no doubts about that. But I thought that, like in every other capital I've ever been in when there's a World Cup match going on, everybody would have gotten home in Lagos to watch the game at home. Lagos is the only city I know where the roads are so bad that people couldn't even get home to watch the World Cup. I thought I was going to drive through empty roads to the airport, but everybody was stuck in the same regular traffic jams, having to listen to the game on their car radios. You know, you've got to fix the infrastructure, and I think again what's happening down in here is a remarkable tribute again to the visionary leadership. This is going to have some of the best infrastructure in the country, and that is a fantastic thing. Let me just say though that if you, like me, see a lot of have a lot of African friends in London, you have this phenomenon of knowing some really brilliant Nigerians. Some of them come back. Mr. Aganga, here amongst us, used to be a banker in London. but not enough do. And what is the common factor?